1920. Alright, so some of the words I'm going to use, they're indigenous African words. I'm calling on God Almighty. And then I'm going to call... Yeah, we're going to get up. I just want to explain to a lot of people. I'm going to call on God Almighty. And then I'm going to call on angels, God's angels in African language. And then after that, I'm going to call on my own ancestors. My own. And then when I finish calling my own, I want you to participate in calling on your own ancestors. I'm not saying Malcolm X and Dr. No, your own ancestors. Because in African culture, that is the first way to God. Through your own immediate ancestors. And this is what they wiped out. This is what built the pyramid. You want to know what built the pyramid? It's your ancestors. Ancestors, your own bloodline. That energy. That force. Alright, and if you have any questions, I'll explain later on the names that I call. Alright? Okay, everybody stand. Oh, Nyame Wakumpong. Shani Pam Kwame inside, Sasia inside, Hune Ham inside, Daddy Kofi inside, and Kansa inside, Ye be a go inside, a Tintim inside, Swami Kwesi inside, a Rilla Day inside, Open Mante inside, say who inside, Nana Esekitua inside, Nana Open inside, Kwajibi surgery, 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 surgery. It is me, Jahi, Issa. Papa and Mama Weaver inside. Great Grandma Lucy inside. Uncle Jonas inside. Dorothy May Fingers inside. Paulette Fingers inside. Laverne Fingers inside. Roberta and Robert Lee inside. If I call one spirit, I call on you all. Now you call on your own.
Peaches of Sa.
Sa means drink. I'm just saying drink. I'm calling on the spirits to come and drink with us.
Sydney Valentine.
Drink, drink. Drink, drink,
Sa.
drink, drink,
Sa.
drink, 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 drink,
Drink. Sa.
drink. Come drink, 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 drink. Join
Lilla
us.
Lawrence.
Drink,
Sa.
drink, drink, drink.
Thomas Red. Sa.
Drink, drink. Drink,
Sa.
sa, drink, drink,
Sa.
Sa.
drink, drink, drink,
Sa.
drink, drink, drink,
Sa.
drink,
Sa.
drink,
Sa.
drink, drink,
Sa.
drink, drink. Oh, spirits, we thank you for coming. We ask that you protect us on our way back. We ask that you bring us plenty of blessings, plenty of resources that we need to rebuild your kingdom here on earth. We know only through you that we have abundance life. We ask that all of our needs be given to us, all of the answers that we've been asking for be given to us. The strength, the relationship, love, prosperity, everything that we need to be prosperous and for our children and our children's children. We ask these things in your name. I'm in roll, yo.
Sorry.
Amen. So, spirits are here.
Yeah.
Let's say welcome, greetings. All here. We got our ancestors. They're always, particularly us who were born in America. Our ancestors are with us all the time. What I did, this is a sacrifice with water, an offering. On certain days, I present certain offerings to my, what we call my ancient divine divinities and my ancestors. I have an ancestor altar in my house, and I feed my mother, who made her transition into the spiritual world 8 years ago, and I feed my grandparents, my great-grandparents. And for that, they come and help me. They assist me in everything that I do. right? And this is the key to our liberation. This is what they have taken away from us in our 300-year journey. They say that's evil. It's witchcraft. That's what they taught us. That's all evil. But when you look in the Bible, that's what they're doing. They're doing ancestral veneration all throughout the Bible. Transfiguration. There's one story where Jesus he goes to the mountain, and his disciples see him up there with Abraham and Moses, and they said, "Oh, Master, we just saw you with Elijah and all the other ones. Shall we build a shrine, an altar for you and them?" Because when someone sees an ancestral spirit, you build an altar. This is African culture to ensure that their spirit comes back all the time to help us. And Jesus said, "Oh no, if you do that, the people wouldn't understand, because the people were Romanized, right? And they wanted to be Romans." He said, "You'll spook the people." But this is the time that we begin to start back communicating with our ancestors, particularly to the youth, because they come to the kids a lot. And then the parents, because we've been miseducated, tell them, "Oh, don't think about that." But the kids, the ancestors, they come to them all the time. And they speak to them. And that's a gift. And that's power. That's our power. That is our power. That's what builds kingdoms and empires. I worked in D.C. When I was doing my PH.D. at Howard. I worked in D.C. for the National Park Service. Right? That's under the Department of Agriculture. I worked for 3 agencies in the Department of Agriculture. And I worked on the mall in D.C. Anybody ever been to the mall in D.C.? Right? What's at the mall in D.C.?
African monuments and good stuff.
What are the European stuff there? The Washington Monument. Right? What else? The Lincoln Monument. They're worshiping their ancestors.
That's right.
The Jefferson Monument.
That's right. That's right.
These things are humongous temples to their ancestors. But they tell us not to do it. I worked there for 3 years. I saw the rituals those Europeans do annually at those temples. The so-called Masons. They're doing rituals and invoking the spirits of George Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln. That's why when every election, presidential election, where do they have the ceremony at? Right there on the monuments. They're doing rituals there. They got big temples for their ancestors. And they're copying it off of us. But they told us not to do it. So we don't even know how to communicate with our own ancestors. And they're coming to us all the time in dreams. Sometimes they're coming and they're touching our hair. And we smell the food that they used to cook for us. We don't understand because they took that power from us. We don't know how to communicate with that power, to harness that energy for our liberation and our salvation. So hopefully today with this prayer, some of these ancestors will come to you after this. We did a ritual at the ocean a few years ago. I do these ancient ocean baths that I was taught in Africa to help us harness our spirits and our energy. And the sister was saying that the ancestors were coming. One sister, she came last time when I was here, and she was saying how her own ancestor saved her grandson who was someone shot at the house. And one of her ancestors came and told her while she was sitting down to go get your son right outside.
That's her son,
Yeah.
her oldest son right here.
The ancestor came and told her to come and get her son.
Yes, sir.
And 5 minutes later, somebody came by and sprayed the house.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Our ancestors are always trying to communicate with us and help us. That's the power. That's the untold power that they took from us. Right? But it's still within us.
That's right, brother.
We have to rekindle it and understand it. But they miseducated us with a lot of lies and we don't understand anymore. All right? So today we're going to deal with this very exciting topic. This is the first time that I dealt with this topic and I'm excited. But first I want to, before we get into it, I want to show you a movie. Can we cut off this light?
Yeah, just hit the switch right there, brother.
Right here.
Yeah, yes, sir. And by the way,
Can y'all see that this is a movie?
That's
The
perfect.
concept was my concept, based off of my research and my publications, and based off of what we're going to talk about today. This is a movie starring Akon. It's called The American King. It's a story. I'm one of the producers in this movie. It'll be out by the end of this year. But it's a story about an African king who dies in Africa. And he had plenty of wives, but none of his wives gave him a male heir to the throne. And so they asked all the men throughout the kingdom to come and sit on the throne. But the spirits rejected all the men because they weren't pure. And one night, the high priest of the kingdom had a dream that the real heir to the throne was sold off into slavery. It was that family's time to take the throne. And the spirits showed them how they were sold off into slavery, and how they moved into the slave trade from Africa, the ships. Then the mother was from South Carolina, the father was from Louisiana, and then they ended up in Compton, California. And the last son had just got out of prison for selling weed. He had a college degree, but he couldn't find a job. So he started selling ganja, marijuana, something that comes up from the earth. And they put him in jail. He gets out, and 2 weeks later, the royal family comes, does some juju on him, and convinces him that he has to return to Africa to reclaim his royalty that was taken from his family 400 years, 300 years prior. And it's starring Akon. You can Google it. It's called American King. And I'll be going around the country in a few months once we finish with all the editing and everything. We'll be promoting this, a low-budget movie, but it's ours. Amen. It's purely 100% black funded. And I'm excited about it because this topic that I'm dealing with today deals with this issue. This is the first time that I'm lecturing on this topic, and I'm very excited.
Got like a minute, right?
Very good. All right. The return of the black kings and queens, the forgotten history of African divine kingship in the United States and the rest of the African diaspora. This is a very timely topic. And I'm telling you, this topic, particularly to the youth, our history did not start with slavery.
that's right.
This is what they want to convince us, that our history began with slavery. It's not true. They wiped this out from us. They want us to think we are non-people. We have no connection with the rest of the African world. And for the most part, they have been successful at this, in convincing us that our history began here in slavery. It's not true. It's not true. And it's not true because we have never been taught to correct history. Even me as a PhD student, doing my PhD at one of the most elitist universities in the country, they didn't really deal with this subject. They didn't deal with it. The return of the black kings and queens. Because that's exactly what we are. This is why we say in our culture in the United States, we call each other kings and queens. A brother walked through, the brother said, oh, here's another royalty. Here's another brother with a crime. Right? Isn't that what he said to you? That's a part of our culture. Because our ancestors that were brought here, many of them were coming from various royal families in Africa. Many of them. In fact, They deliberately, the Europeans deliberately destroyed many of the raw families. To this day in Western Central Africa, they can't get their act together because those who hold some of the keys to the frequencies in that area of Africa are here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm telling you, I know this through my 30 trips throughout the interior of Africa. My 30 trips. Not one of my trips was funded by a European. It was all financed by myself because my grandmother, whose great-grandmother was born in Africa. My grandmother lived to be 90 years old. Her great-great-grandmother, her great-grandmother raised her until she was 10 and she died. She lived to be 90-something. And she told her about her grandmother who was African born on my mother's side. And she told us that they brought over a pot. In my families, this is what we talk about in our family. That a pot. And as a little child, I heard these stories. That we were royalty and we had a pot. And not understanding what that pot meant until I started going to Africa. What the pot symbolized. And this is what the movie on the American King is about. And I talk about this in my doctoral dissertation in my upcoming book on the Garvey movement in Louisiana. It's called Until Africa is Redeemed. Right? So now we're going to talk about the return of the black kings and queens because we have to return. We have to reclaim. And I'm not going to just give you history. I'm going to give you some very pragmatic things you can do in your house to improve your lives, to improve the lives of your children, to improve the lives of your love life if you don't have it. I'm going to give you some very practical instructions that you're not going to get anywhere else. And I'm telling you this because it has improved my life. This is one of the very reasons why I'm here talking to you. After I had a 3-year battle with the most powerful European family in the United States, the Bidens. I had to fight them for 3 years. And my ancestors helped me win that fight. My own ancestors helped me to win that fight. They were fighting for me the entire time. The entire time. All right? So, let me know when that stops. Then I'll pause so that you can redo it because we want to get all of this on.
Okay.
Who are we? Right here. This is a map of Africa, right?
Yeah, we got it.
If you see right here at the far right here is classical Kemet. Right here, this is Kemet. This is Egypt. The world's first, the oldest civilization in the world. The ancient Egyptians. How many of here heard of the ancient Egyptians?
Yes, sir.
How many knew that they were black?
Yes,
That's
sir.
right.
They were black. They looked like me. Thick lips.
Yes, sir.
Black skin.
Yes,
wide nose.
Yes,
Kinky
sir.
hair.
Yes, sir.
That's the ancient Egyptians. Right? Started right here in the Nile Valley civilization. Right in this area right here. But the birth of Kemet, or what we call ancient Egyptian, did not start there. The birth of Kemet started right here in this area. You see this arrow right here? Y'all see the arrow going around? No?
Here, stop. The laser pointer.
Okay, all right, no problem.
You can do it from the side of the tape. Sorry, I apologize. Go ahead, brother. You do it.
Hey, Tony, come here, do me a favor. I want you to sit right here. And you can
Yeah, there you go.
touch this right here. I want you to touch this arrow. When I say touch it, touch it. You see that? Go up and down. You see right here, one here. You see? So this is down, this is up. So when I tell you to touch it, do it for me, all right? Thank you. All right. This is where Kemet, classical Kemet, ancient Egypt, right here, the pharaohs, the pyramids. I've been to Egypt twice. I studied there. I first went through a scholarship through Dr. Yosef Ben Yakin, gave me money to go when I was an undergrad student. That was my first trip. My second trip, I took one of the most renowned Nubiologists, Egyptologists of our generation, whose name is Dr. Salim Faraji. He's a professor of history at Cal State Dominguez Hill. He's my best friend. Scholarly, my scholarly best friend. Right? In '98, we traveled together. That was my second trip. And we spent 60 days traveling up and down the Nile, going into the temples, going into the libraries, looking at books that have never been seen, exposed to the public. We had access. But the birth of Kemet didn't start here. It actually started in this area, right in here, in the Sahel. About 18,000 years ago. 18,000 years ago. And once the Sahara dried up, those people moved. Some of them moved north, some moved east, which started the Nile Valley civilization called Nubia. Started along the Yellow Nile. Nobody talks about the Yellow Nile. We hear about the white and the blue Nile, but we don't know that the birth of Kemet is right here among the blue-black people, right? But from here, these people, they moved here, they moved here, they moved west, and some moved south, right? Go down, Tony. Now, you don't have to say Dr. Issa lying. Tell you what Europeans are saying. How many people heard of National Geographic? Huh? Everybody's heard. Here they are saying that Egyptians were black. These are white people saying this. So you don't have to say that Dr. Issa's lying for those of y'all who can't really believe whenever a black man says something. We got to get validity for somebody white. All right, no problem. They even said it. But they're talking about, they're only mostly talking about those in Nubia. They're still not talking about those in Upper Egypt, in Kemet. But we know all of those dynasties, they were black, jet black. I know. All of the statues, they look like all of us in here. Most of them were dark. Some of them were light-skinned. But 90% of them were dark-skinned. They looked just like me. Thick lips, broad nose, was just like this brother here. Right? This is a king from the 25th dynastic period. But from the pre-dynastic period, all the way up into the last, in which Dr. Faraji just wrote the only book that deals with the last dynastic period. And guess what period that was?
25th?
No. 1000 AD. Right? He just wrote the only study on the last dynastic. 1000 AD. That's when the last dynastic period ended in that area. And because of invasions from the Greeks, then the Romans, and other European and Asiatic groups, those people might go up again, Tony. Up, not down, up. Thank you. All right? Those people migrated. They migrated to here and here, and they set up kingdoms in the ancient kingdom of Ghana, the ancient kingdom of Songhai, Mali and Songhai. Right? They migrated. They were migrating, moving, constantly moving. Go down again, Tony. Go down one more time. All right? Here's another one. They were trying to say King Tut looked like this. We know that's not true. We now know it's not true. I can show you at another time. They even did a forensic analysis of King Tut. And he looked just like this young man right here. All right? This is the fake one. But they never give up in their lies and their deception to try to control the image because they don't want us relating back. Right? Was Cleopatra black? course she was black. They only doing this in Newsweek because we took back our history. We took it back. We Africans in the diaspora, we took it back. We've been studying Kemet since the 19th century in this country. Since the 19th century, I'm talking about Nat Turner was studying Kemet. Nat Turner was studying Kemet. How do we know this? Because he had a book by David Walker called The Appeal. And in David Walker's Appeal, he published this in 1828, 3 years before Nat Turner did his armed revolution. It was an armed resistance movement. It wasn't a revolt because we were not citizens, and only citizens can revolt.
Talk to him.
It was an armed liberation movement, an attempt to try to reclaim our African kingdoms, to reestablish them in the diaspora. All right, go down, Tony. This is a picture of the 25th dynastic period. I just wanted to show you, but these are all black people. They were not white. Don't believe those lies. All of those figures in the Bible were black. I'm giving a lecture in a Hosky Tuesday called The Africans Who Wrote the Bible. A PowerPoint presentation. Go down, Tony. John Henry Clark. How many of us heard of John Henry Clark? All right? I wanted to be like Dr. Clark and Dr. Ben.
Amen.
I didn't want to be like anybody else. You know how people say they want to be police officers? No. I wanted to be Dr. Ben. I wanted to be Dr. Clark. I used to write down their lectures and imitate them and speak like them in the same pattern. That's what I wanted to be like. I went to college. I got a football scholarship. I was fortunate. But I knew that I was going to get my PhD. And then when I met Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, oh, you couldn't tell me anything. I knew where I was headed. And Dr. Clark told me personally, son, to further what we have done, you have to go to Africa and study. You have to go and sit down with those so-called primitive people because they have the knowledge. He told me this. And that's exactly what I did. And I became addicted to it. Dr. Clark said, history is not everything, but it is the starting point. History is the clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is a compass they use to find themselves on the map of human geography. It tells them where they are, but more importantly, what they must be. Go down, Tom. Dr. Clark also said, a people's relationship to their heritage, I put in Africa, it's the same as the relationship of a child to his mother. Once we stop dealing with Africa, we cut off our mother source. It's the same way that a child is snatched away from his mother out of the hospital bed. And this is what happened to us here in the Americas. They have systematically and gradually snatched that from us. When the early Europeans first, this is Dr. Clark, again, when the early Europeans first met Africans at the crossroad of history, it was a respectful meeting. And the Africans were not slaves.
Amen.
The Africans were not slaves when the European met us in Africa before they robbed us and brought us here.
Yes.
We were not slaves. That's why I say our history does not start with slavery. This is very important. Their nations were old before Europe was born. We already saw Kemet. And I tell a lot of the brothers on the conscious community who are on YouTube and Sarnetta, studying Kemet is beautiful. I've been there twice. Lectured at the universities. Lectured at, I was in Ethiopia. We're Nubia. I was there. I lectured at the University of Addis Ababa. It's beautiful. Well, we can't bypass Western Central Africa. And we only bypass that because we don't know the history. We haven't been taught. And I'm going to show you why we haven't been taught. Go down, Tony. All right? Again, these are some of the kingdoms that we were taken from. You've never heard this before. Now, I'm going to show you some more stuff. Some real serious stuff. Right? These are the kingdoms that we, black folk in America, were taken from. This is not to say that African people weren't traveling the world before Columbus. We know we were setting up. We know about the Olmec civilizations. We know about all of that, our impact on China, that the first civilizations there were African people too. We know we went everywhere. But most of us Africans who are here in North Carolina, a war was waged against our people. And the war continues. We've been at a 500-year war. And the best way to continue that war is to take the history away. So we've never heard this part. These are kingdoms, the Mossad. Right? All of these kingdoms. Right? All of these kingdoms, all of these independent African states. This is where what the European came into. And guess what? He wrote it down. Not only did he write it down when he started coming to Africa during the 15th century and snatching us up, he would come in with his artists and his historians.
All right.
He would come in with his artists and his historians, and they would jot down our history, and they would paint us. Go down, Tony, and let me show you what they would do. Dr. Issa did not paint this. A European painted this. This is in the Congo, the 16th century, 1540s. This is what the European came into. What do you see them doing? Bowing down to an African king. They drew this. Dr. Issa didn't draw this. They weren't coming into backwards people. These are lies. They had to come and submit or be killed or have their heads chopped off. See the king in all of his garment, these European explorers, look at them on their knees. Your majesty. But they tricked us. They tricked us. They came with technology. We thought they wanted to trade. Oh yeah, they wanted to trade. They wanted the real black gold right here. They wanted the real black gold right here, the skin. They wanted our labor. And they tricked us. We didn't understand they were coming to study us. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos like this. They drew these. At that time. Another one, Tony. Look, another one. Dr. Issa didn't do this. Look, this guy right here drew it. The Dutch coming in. This particular king. He has to come before the king, another king of the Congo. And what are they doing? What are these Europeans doing? On their knees. They thought so highly of these Africans. This is what Dr. Clark, go up again. Go up. I go up again. I'm going to show you. Again. What did Dr. Clark say? When the early Europeans first met Africans at the crossroad of history, it was a respectful meeting. And Africans were not slaves. Their nations were old before Europe was born. Isn't this what, go down, Tony. Isn't this what we're seeing? Go down again. Isn't this what we're seeing? Is this not respect? Is this not respect?
Utmost.
Go down, Tony. Is this not respect? Look, there were no chandeliers in the Congo. But they thought so highly, these Europeans. They said, we got to throw on a chandelier. These people are superior than us. They didn't say they were African savages and backwards. No. They had vast trade routes all over Africa, going into the Middle East. It was vast wealth of all kinds, not just ivory and lion skin and gold and diamonds. It was so much wealth. The European is looking at them with respect, bowing on their knees. This is what they drew. They drew hundreds and hundreds of these paintings. Go down, Tony. Look at another one. Right? Archibald Gazelle. This is in Benin, the Inland Kingdom. Look, they got on clothes. You mean that Africans ain't running around naked? The 16th century. All right? Negro Election Day. All over the Northeast. In New Jersey, where they had slavery. In New York. In Delaware. They had what you call Negro election. This festival began in 1741 and several times in New England as a part of the local election of the black representative of that community. The festival incorporated an aspect of West African culture and ritual celebrations, such as the traditional dancing and feasting and parade. They would walk around with their royalties under the umbrella. We know, we got pictures of it. We know. This is why we're still calling each other in our culture kings and queens. The person elected often either belonged to a wealthy master or came from a family of chiefs or kings in Africa. Right? Go down one. This is the movie, Prince Among Slaves. You can Google, it's all on YouTube. You can watch it. But I want y'all to know when you watch, this was very common. It just didn't happen in Louis, Mississippi. It was all over. Go down. So what happened? The reemergence of African kingdoms in the New World. Not slave revolts, but armed resistant movement. There were more than 300 of them right here in the United States. So-called slave revolts. They were not revolts. They were attempts to re-establish African kingdoms. And in some places we did. In the Dismal Swamps, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Right here. We re-established African kingdoms right here. In an attempt to go back to Africa. Yes. Right? Yes. In Palmeiras, in Brazil, they had a kingdom for 100 years. When y'all go home, I'm giving everybody an assignment who has internet. I want you, Tony Jr., I want you to do this. I want you to look at the Google. I want you to Google YouTube. The African so-called Bush Negroes in Dutch Guyana. It's called Suriname. The country is called Suriname now. Suriname, yes. Those people, those Africans who were taken from Ghana and Nigeria, they fought their European masters, and to this day, they live in the interior of South America along the Amazon River. They have 7 kingdoms there. To this day, living like they did 500 years ago. To this day, speaking the language, doing all the rituals, everything. To this day, you go there, you will see it. I know some of them. I know some of them in New York and in Delaware. To this day, and they're proud of their culture. And they're still speaking the same language that they left with. Yes. Doing all the rituals. You go into some of their areas, you would think you were in Africa 300 years ago. To this day. And they got their kingdoms and their royal lines still established. So they weren't able to destroy all of us. right? In the United States, there were over 300 armed resistance movements. Stop saying slave revolts. We were still citizens of these African kingdoms that they took us from. All right? Here are just some of them. These are some of them. Just a few. All right? We fought. We didn't just accept it. We were trying to go back. Go down, T.
How about what about
Just say it. Martin Delaney. How many people heard of Martin Delaney? Raise your hand. All right? For the young people. I'm almost done, all right? I know y'all tired.
I ain't.
You like this? You my man. I like that. I like that. No, ain't. See, Ebonics is a language within itself. It's a mixture of Bantu language and English. And it has the same category as any other language. The American Linguistical Society in 1970 said Ebonics is just as official of a language as English and Spanish and German and any other language. So if you want to say I ain't, that is the proper language. This
I want
is a
him
mixture.
to be grammatically correct.
That is grammatically correct.
In my
Now what you're saying is, will they accept that in the European English controlled schools? Ain't they will accept. Going down yonder, they ain't gonna accept.
like that, no.
Y'all don't talk like that no more?
Never had. It's like ancestral.
Yeah, my grandma used to talk about it. I didn't even understand my grandma. She used to say, I swear to God, it was all African. I didn't understand what she was saying. Alright, so Delaney, right? This was a bad brother. This brother advocated and founded a new nation on the eastern coast of Africa for the settlement of colored people in the United States and elsewhere. Delaney's grandmother was the princess of a king in Nigeria who was sold into slavery. And he was the first black man to go to Harvard and get a medical degree. And all he wrote about is going back to Africa. And he was able to secure $45,000 to go back to Africa to renegotiate with the African kings for black people to return back to Africa. This was happening throughout our existence in this country. He sailed from New York to Liberia. He didn't like Liberia. Went to what is now known, this is in Nigeria, Abokutu region. Right? And they said that black people could come back and resettle. When he came back to the U.S., it was 1961. 1861? What happened in 1861?
Civil War.
The Civil War. And we thought we were going to be free then. We said, oh, we arm ourselves and we go kill those white slave owners in the North. They needed us because they were losing the war. They armed 200,000 black people, right? That's right. And that's why we have this monument right here. The oldest black Civil War monument in the United States is right here. Y'all didn't know that, did y'all? The oldest black Civil War monument in the United States is right here, right around the corner. The oldest.
Black people were here.
Yeah.
They were erected.
That's right. At that time period, they erected that in 1901. They weren't scared. They wasn't scared of the white folk in 1901. They said, yeah, we finna honor those Africans who fought for our freedom. And they did it in 1901. What about now? We scared now. 2000, we can't even talk openly about our history. We scared. We've gone backwards because they took our history away. Right? Those people knew who they were. All right. And we had separate schools. We had segregation. Right? So we weren't scared. We were teaching our own history and culture. Now that we're integrated, we don't know nothing. All right? Go down, T. This cat, Tunis Campbell, you never heard of him. Bad brother. All right? Google him. This cat came from Jersey right after the Civil War, and on the Georgia Sea Island, the Geechee people, right? They set up an independent country on the Sea Island. Black people had their own countries right after the Civil War. They elected their own president. This was happening all over the South after the Civil War. We were setting up our own countries. But we also had sovereign territories in the swamps, not just in the swamps, all over. We had African kingdoms. We were reestablishing them. King Alfred came from the Gold Coast, what is now known as Salt Lake, Ghana, a Fanti man. He comes to the U.S., sets up a corporation because the kings in his area said, go and bring our people back. This is in 1914. He starts Africa. This is before Garvey. A West African king comes. This was very common. He's not the only one. And hundreds of black people go back with him. They're still in Ghana today, those families. They went back. Right? My family. I called two of my ancestors. One left Arkansas in 1914 and went to Liberia. The whole county got up and left. 500 people. And they're still in Liberia to this day. We were going back. My great-great-grandfather's brother and his clan, they all got up and got on the ship and left. They're still in Liberia today, y'all. All right, so hundreds of us wanted to go back. Go down. This, in my manuscript, I deal with this. This one king, prince from Uganda. He comes in, this is before Garvey. And he sets up and he tries to convince black people in Louisiana to raise $200,000 to go back. This is $200,000 in 1916. That's probably worth about $20 million today. Black people were raising money, right? And then the Garvey movement came and overwhelmed everybody with a bigger plan. Go down, Tony. We're trying to reestablish ourselves. Then Garvey died in 1940. The role of the British was already being challenged in India by the rising expectations of our African colonies. Marcus Garvey's advocacy of African redemption, the restoration of the African state, sovereign political entity in the world of world affairs was still a dream without fulfillment. This is John Henry Clark said this about Garvey. Garvey comes onto the scene. Garvey didn't bring nothing new. He was tapping into an energy that was already there. Black people wanted to go back to Africa. In North Carolina, there were over 42 Garvey branches. 42. In Louisiana, there were over 100. Go down. Now, this is deep right here. Listen. Garvey goes to speak at Howard University in 1922. Return of the black kings and queens. This is what he says. I want Negroes first to realize that every Negro is an African citizen. He's speaking to the students at Howard University, 1922. Before we Americans or West Indians were citizens, before we were African citizens, Negroes were never born originally to the Americas and West Indies. Negroes were initially born to Africa. Isn't that so? He's speaking. This is his speech. Where did your forefathers come from? Did they come from Georgia? No. They came from Sierra Leone, West Africa. They came from here. They came from there. West Africa. They were first African citizens before they were emancipated by Abraham Lincoln and made Afro-Americans by Victoria and made Afro-West Indians. Now, if a Frenchman leaves France, say he has left France 50 years and came to the America and never asked or applied for nationalization paper, if he lives for 50 years, what would he be? He would be a Frenchman. He would never be be an American citizen until he went through the process of action and applied for naturalization. He has first of all, according to the law of the country, must apply for naturalization papers before he can become a naturalized American citizen. He lived for 100 years and never applied for naturalization papers. He should always be a Frenchman. Now, sir, can you remember the time when your forefathers applied for naturalization? Tony, did your forefathers apply for naturalization? No, sir.
We're the only people.
We're the only ones.
Without going.
So, Garvey is saying, your grandparents never got nationalization papers. They were gotten from Africa against their will. They were citizens of Africa.
Still remain.
And still, today, brother and sisters, we are citizens of Africa. We're citizens of those kingdoms and city-states and clans that they took us from. Because we never applied for naturalizations. We never applied. They didn't ask us if we wanted to be citizens. They threw it on us for political convenience, to punish the white southern plantation owners who caused the Civil War. Is this not true? Did your ancestors apply for a naturalization? No. They just gave you it. We the only one. So that means we never gave up our citizenship from the kingdoms that they took us from. This is a very serious issue, y'all. This is an issue we have to take up with the African Union. Because we never, ever gave up our citizenship. Ever. It's very unique. And I've been pushing this for the last 6 months. Go down. We're going to end with this. Du Bois. I know a lot of people think they know Du Bois, right? And I have to deal with Cat Swain. We did no real reading all the damn time. They like to hold people in a place of history. You know, he did stuff. He went against Garvey. Garvey wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. Malcolm perfect? No. Malcolm was what? Before he became Malcolm X. He was what? He was a drug addict, a heroin addict, a pimp.
That's right.
But we don't hold him in that history. Why do we do that? Because we ain't reading. We don't know. This is what Du Bois lived to be 90. He was constantly changing. And Du Bois did something that Malcolm couldn't do because they assassinated Malcolm, shot him 22 times in front of his wife and children. 22 times. You imagine you 5 years old and your daddy up there speaking and they shoot him 22 times. What would that do to you psychologically?
I'd be traumatized.
You would be traumatized, young brother. All your life. A man who gave his life. Right? But this is what Du Bois said. He was 90 years old when he said this. His last speech in the United States was at Johnson C. Smith University. He said, some of you are ashamed of them. Some are ashamed of themselves and their folk. They regard the study of black biography, the study of black people, and their writing of black literature in vain attempt to pretend that black people are really equal to whites. That tends to be the point of view of those of our children who are educated in white schools.
That's right.
There are going to be schools which do not. He's writing in 1960. 6 years after Brown versus Board of Education, the Supreme Court case that ends legal segregation. Listen what Du Bois is saying. He's speaking to the teachers union. He's saying, y'all are messing up. Y'all messing up and it's going to hurt us. Then he goes and says, there are going to be schools which do not discriminate against black people, and the number is going to increase slowly with the present. But rapidly in the future, long before the year he's in 1960 predicting what's going to happen in the year 2000. This is his last speech in the United He leaves here, moves to Ghana, becomes a national hero in Ghana. They have a 2-acre center called the Du Bois Center of Pan-African History and Culture in Ghana. I worked there as a scholar in residence. I was proud to say that I worked there in Ghana. He worked for Nkrumah to organize the history of black people called Africana Studies. There will be no school segregation based on race. The deficiency of knowledge of black history and culture, however, will remain. And this is danger. And this danger must be met, or else the black man in America will what?
Disappear.
Disappear. Is this not where we are now?
Yes, sir.
He said this by 2000. This is what's going to happen. We see it now. We're at the crossroads. He said, why is this dangerous? He said, because their history and culture will be lost. Their connection with what? The rising what? African world will be what?
Impossible.
Go down, man. I think that's it. That's it, y'all.
So powerful.
That's where we at. This is where we are. Good story. Right? This is where our kids are. So we gotta set up like right here. We gotta have after school
Yes, sir.
program.
Yes, sir.
Where I'm living now in Brooklyn, New York, I'm living in a Jewish community.
That's right.
They have school after school where they're being taught their history and culture
Yes, sir.
every day.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And when they see me walking, they run away. They don't want to be associated with nobody black. I got you. Wherever we are, we gotta have places like this where we're also helping our kids with their reading and their writing, and we're teaching them black and African culture and history.
That's right.
This is what we gotta do. And we gotta convince our ignorant people in the churches that
Yes,
they're our
sir.
people.
Yes, sir. Yes.
They're our cousins and our loved ones.
Yes,
We
sir.
can't dismiss them.
Yes, sir.
These are our mothers. And we gotta convince them this is what we gotta do, or else we're going to disappear.
That's right.
I'm telling you, we only got 10 years.
That's right.
That's it.
If that.
If that. This is the time period to do it. I can't do it by myself. I can only show the way and go around and show people. But we gotta do this now. We can't wait. And we gotta fund it. We gotta stop spending our tax money on these silly things and put it into the education of our children.
That's right, brother. That's right.
Or we're gonna disappear. And let me tell you how we ain't gonna disappear in the sense, he ain't talking about physical disappearance. He's saying because with all the memory of Africa, then they can do anything to us. Already, they have a pipeline from where? The schools from in Missouri, where I'm from. They just passed the law saying if you caught fighting in school at his age, he's going to jail.
Felon. They charged him with a felon.
They're going to do this in North. They're working on the bill right now in North Carolina. For not just boys, but girls too. Because we don't have any defense mechanism. Mostly because we've lost our history and our connection with Africa. This is where we're at. We're at the crossroad right now. So what Tony is doing, Tony asked for volunteers. I'm going to start going around the country talking like this in small locations and setting up these schools. I have a curriculum already put together. I'm going to be teaching online too for homeschooling. And all of our kids, we have to do this. In a hostel, after school, we got to have a place to put the kids and start teaching them. Don't ask for no grant money because with the grant money comes control. We got to do this ourselves or we're going to perish. All of our kids in 50 years will be looking up from the graveyard and all of our children will be on these prisons working for free back in slavery. That's the intent. All of these black men, African men incarcerated, free labor, they're working the farms now. When Trump was elected, the prison stock, private prison stock, went skyrocketing. Now they're saying they're about to go and start arresting people who are smoking what? Weed. They know this is black youth. They ain't gonna arrest no white kids. We know they are the number ones doing it. This is for us because we lost this place in history. But Dr. Clark said you cannot continually oppress a historic people. You can't do it. You can't oppress a people who have a memory of their history. If we don't move